ask my friend Bob Swarthe here about my experience during World War II. So I'll give you a little prologue to it. The war had broken out, and it was a terrible time, really. There was rumors. We were foreigners. People had rumors about my dad not having a citizenship papers, and people stopped sorting our grocery store for a while. They all came back. But the draft was on, and my older brother was taken, one of the first people to be drafted and sent to New Guinea. And he had been in the service about 6 months, and my dad used to believe in equal opportunity for others, but not his own family. He didn't pay any of us wages, so we were all of us had worked in a grocery store. So when my turn came up to enlist, my dad went behind my back and went to the draft board and told them that he needed me because he couldn't run the grocery store without me. So they gave me a 6 months deferment, which totally humiliated me. I mean, people would come in and say, well, my boy's overseas. How come you're still here, Victor? And I went crazy because all I did was go see newsreel footage about, what was happening with Hitler and what was happening. The one interesting newsreel, I will tell this as a prologue because it's really good. I went to this newsreel where they showed Haile Selassie and they showed Mussolini invading Haile Selassie's Ethiopia. And they showed these tanks, these modern tanks that Mussolini had, going and shooting up the Africans who were throwing spears at the tank, kind of like that movie Bob Swarthe made with the little people. You remember that, Chasing Mickey? Mm-hmm. Anyway, and the entire theater was laughing. It was like a comedy. It was, look at those natives throwing spears at these modern tanks. It was like, and I thought it was funny too. I mean, I was laughing along with everybody. Later, when I reconstructed it, I realized how, God, pretty horrible. It's like us laughing at shock and awe. Anyway, the newsreel theaters had gotten me so hyped up. All I wanted to do was kill Japanese people and kill Germans. I wanted to be a hero. I wanted to get in a war, get my medals, come back home and be a hero. And I went to my father. I said, Dad, as soon as the 6 months is up, I'm going in. And he said, okay. I won't say no. And I said, okay, because I said, I'm going anyway, whether you say I can or not. Anyway, my cousin, who was in the Coast Guard, was a Coast Guard recruiter, and he had come through Indianapolis showing how the Coast Guard was involved in all the invasions on landing craft. And I said, boy, I want to be in the Coast Guard. He said, when you get in there, they'll ask you what branch you want to be in, just volunteer for the Coast Guard. Well, I volunteered for the Coast Guard. Guess where they sent me? Sent me to Fire Island. I'm pounding the beach of Fire Island in the middle of winter time. All the people are laughing at us, saying, yeah, they were singing this song. I'll sing it for you. It says, on the shores of Coney Island, looking outward to the sea, stands a Coast Guard air raid warden wearing V for victory. Now, while the Army and the Navy go forth to meet the foe, the only fighting that a Coast Guard will see is in a moving picture show. And they're singing this, and here I'm humiliated out on that freezing beach, pounding it back and forth. So my first liberty, my friend and I went down and we put our thing in for the Marines for submarine duty. For the Marines, we put our names in because you could go down to New York and they had all these stations where you could volunteer. So we said, we're gonna. How old were you? I was 18. I just turned 19, I think. And so we both put in for the submarine duty and the Navy because to transfer from the Coast Guard to the Navy. We got back to we were on it was called a Coast Guard station. They were all up and down the coast. It's where just one station down from where the German submarine landed with the saboteurs on it. But it was a terrible duty. I mean, 4 hours at night walking up and down the beach. It was freezing winter. So I told his chief on our station, I said, well, we're out of here. We just volunteered for the Navy. And it wasn't like 2 days later, and we get orders to go to Europe. This kid and I and two other people, and we were being transferred to landing craft in Europe. And God, was I relieved. I mean, it was just like a godsend. I said, finally, I'm going to see some action. So we took a Liberty ship. Now, up to now, I had only seen war in the movies. I had seen John Wayne, Ronald Reagan, all that crap we were putting out, and how brave everybody was and everything. I had never ever been frightened myself. I had never been in a position of jeopardy. And so we're on this Liberty ship, freezing, going across the North Atlantic. We were in a 6-knot convoy because the convoy travels as slow as the slowest ship in the convoy. And as we were getting near England and we were starting to go there, one night we're all sleeping, and they'd have these drills every evening, and we'd have to ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling, they have a general alarm, and we'd all have to run up to our post. And the post I had was on a 20-millimeter cannon right next to this big smokestack. The nice thing about it was the smokestack was warm, and we got on the gun. If we got freezing, we could walk over to lean against the smokestack. So this one night, this alarm goes off, and as we're getting dressed up to go topside, there was a ship. It would just vibrate. And we didn't know what was happening. We realized it wasn't just a false alarm. So as we go up and I get to my station, it was these British escort ships were going through the flotilla, firing off these sub bombs, depth charges. And there were like 5 fires out there, and there was this Marine guy that was manning the 20-millimeter cannon. And I said, I looked out there and I seen these fires, and I said, what is it? He says, those ships are on fire. They've just been torpedoed. And one of the fires went out, and I said to the guy, hey, they just put that fire out. He said, bullshit, that thing sunk. Well, he said that. And all of a sudden I realized that could be us, you know. And my knees got weak, and the only thing that kept me from fainting was the smokestack behind me. I just went up against that stack, and that warm heat regenerated me, and now it's scary. It's scary. For that entire night, nobody went below. We all slept out freezing. We wouldn't go below in the stack because we got hit again. And all they did was escort, but evidently they sunk about 5 ships. In the flotilla, probably 60 ships. We go around, and to make a long story short, I picked my ship up in southern England. My landing craft infantry, which was 158 feet long, and it was about 35 feet wide. And it was a landing craft with 2 ramps on both sides. And what it did was take 200 troops, and it would land them on the beach. So we were doing, it was preparing for Normandy. We didn't know it at the time. So it was about like 2 months of preparation. And we'd go out and make landings and everything. We'd go up the Dart River. We just do all sorts of maneuvers and everything. We do drills with the flags and stuff like that. And I was just so happy. But finally, I was going to be able to participate in this war and get the Japs and get the Germans. So anyway, to capsulize this so it doesn't go on and on and on, all of a sudden, it was the day before D-Day. They were going to cancel it because it was storms and everything else, and they were debating whether they would do the invasion and if they held it off, then the timing was all off. So Eisenhower had decided to go, and we got this little note from Eisenhower telling us we were about to embark on the greatest endeavor, you know, and it made me so proud and everything. And the night before, a German plane, crippled plane, had come flying right between us, and we were in a little town called Weymouth, and we were between Portsmouth and another town where all the battleships and the heavy artillery was, and they all opened up on the plane, the German plane going over. And the friendly fire injured about 13 guys on our ship. One of the guys, Bunzik, who was in the steering engine room, stuck his head out of the port, and he had a helmet on, and a 20 millimeter went right through the helmet and opened up his whole head, and he had about something like 60 stitches, and they wouldn't take him off the ship because they said he knew too much about the invasion. So here he had to go into the invasion with his whole head wrapped, and he couldn't even put a helmet on. Anyway, those are stupid little things that happen. And so the next day, of course, we travel across the channel, and it was real choppy, and we had 200 troops on board. They were all throwing up. They were seasick. It was miserable. They filled these guys, we had bunks down there, little wire bunks, and they would be 5 up, 4 up on top of each other. It was just crap. 200 guys with their equipment and everything. It was the First Army. I don't know what division it was or anything. And we're headed in to the invasion the following morning. And I had the duty on the number 2 gun, and I was sitting there with a really nice guy, big kid, real rich kid. He was from a really good family, upper New York, and I had told him we were talking. There were about 3 of us in there, and we were seasick too. I was seasick. I was throwing up. The soldiers would come up and say, "God, I don't know how you guys could take it. You must be really." Yeah, it's nothing, you know. Anyway. I told Fletcher, I said, I don't know. I said, my brother's been in New Guinea for 2.5 years. I said, he's still alive. I said, I don't know what would happen if I get killed. And he said, Victor, he said, I'm the only son. I have 6 sisters. He said, some of them are in the waves and everything else. He said, but my dad's counting on me coming back and running the company for him. You know, they're quite wealthy. I said, well, why did you join, for crying out loud? I said, you know, you could have gotten deferred. You know, your dad's rich. And all that sort of. I didn't know that. I didn't use that kind of dialogue, but I just asked him why. And he said, well, I just felt it was my duty. He said, I didn't want to be an officer. I wanted to know what it was like to be in the trenches. And anyway, he was a guy who was always reading this big book. And I used to go up to him and say, Fletcher, what are you reading? He said, Haboush, you're so stupid. He says, go back and read those dirty books that you got, because we had A Maid and a Million Men. You know, we had the gorilla and the woman. We had all that stuff passing through the ship, all that trash. So one day I grabbed the book from him. I said, let me see that book. I opened it up. I said, 1,400 pages. I said, you're out of your mind. It was War and Peace by Tolstoy. He said, give me that book, Haboush. He said, get out of here, you know. But he liked me, and I liked him. We were good friends. So anyway, I'm bringing that up because there's a literal episode with this guy. There was 32 people. We had 4 officers, and the rest were, you know, chiefs and enlisted men. And with that, we had 200 troops on board, right? So the next morning, we were scheduled to hit the beach. I think it was about 40 minutes after H hour. H hour was still a little dark, and the storm was battering. And you know, they had all those iron things in the water and everything, and the Germans were shooting 88s at us, and there was these big water fountains, and we were, you know, what's the matter? You crouched? Can't you shoot straight and stuff like that? It was like gay bravado, you know, trying to be. But I wasn't scared, oddly enough. It was like, whoa, you know, that's a battle over there. 200 yards off the beach, you didn't know there was a war going on. The German Air Force had practically been banished, and there wasn't any really resistance. But what we didn't know was Rommel had left a panzer division there on maneuvers. And the night before, because of the storm, when the planes came over and they were supposed to take out all the machine guns and all that stuff there, they had gone 2 miles over that inland and dropped their bombs, and they hadn't hit one of them. So as we're going in, I'm looking around, and there's all these bodies in the water, everything. I mean, it was pretty scary. And we went in on Easy Red on Omaha, the worst beach of all. It was right by Duhawk Point, where the Rangers went up. It was right to just south of it, I mean, to the left of it a little bit. Of course, I didn't know the names of the beaches at the time. It was Easy Red. It was the most bloody of all the beaches. And finally, we're given orders to start going in. And our skipper had been in Anzio. He had been in 2 other invasions. And he was really an old salt. He was a little tiny red-haired Swedish guy named Gisselson. Very brave. And he was the captain, and he was directing the other ships, and our little group was 8 ships. And we were mixed with Navy LCIs and Coast Guard LCIs, about half and half. And the Navy LCIs were the new ones that had the round turrets, and we had the quadrangle things. But anyway, my station was next to the old man. I was on earphones, and I had one of those big helmets on. And he would say, you know, forward 2 knots, and I'd give the orders down to the people below in a microphone, and they would either, you know, and we had to drop. I'm going over this because it's boring, but I had to give the order. He'd tell me drop stern anchor. So when you're about 200 yards off the beach, you drop the stern anchor so that when you would hit the beach, you wouldn't go too far and you couldn't get off of it. And you'd stop it just as soon as we hit it enough so that the ramps would go to the sand and the guys wouldn't be dumped in the water, like there were in a lot of the little LCVPs that went in, the small craft that went in. Anyway, as we're going, it's havoc in there. I'm sitting up there, and there's a wall in front of me that was a big thing protecting the people in the crow's nest up there. And my eyes, I was ducking down so only I could see between my eyes and the helmet. And I see this dark row. It looked like a bunch of ants, because what happened past all the little iron things, crossings there, was this little ledge, and all the soldiers had piled behind the ledge. And if you weren't behind that ledge, you were out there, and they were machine gunning. And they were killing them as they were getting off. We hit the beach, and the machine guns were aimed right at our ramps, and the guys that were going down the ramps were dropping off on both sides. It sounds like almost like a movie, you know? I was hypnotized up there watching it, and the old man hit me. He said, Haboush, drop the stern anchor. And I'm sitting there watching this thing. So I, okay, drop stern anchor, you know? So we barely got the stern anchor down in time. it was like I was like in a trance. It was like wasn't real. It wasn't happening, and we weren't being hit yet. And what I didn't realize that the soldiers down there, after a few of them went off, they wouldn't come out of the bottom. They were scared to go over the ramps because they knew they were going to get machine gunned. Our bosun mate had to go down there and threaten to shoot them if they didn't come up and get off the ship because we wanted to get off the beach. We were on there way too long. You're only supposed to be there, 15, 20 minutes and get the ship clear and get out of there so you wouldn't get. So we stayed too long, and just as we were getting ready, and the last guys had gone over, and I would say if a third of them made it on the beach without getting killed on the ramps, it would be a lot. And again, it was too hazy for me to have like hard details. But I do remember an LCP that pulled alongside of us and asked us to throw them a line so that they could tie onto us and they could go off with us when we went off, and it would kind of like be a protection for them. And this guy got up on the guy who was running the LCVP got up to grab the line when we threw it, and he got shot. Just like a Western, it was like incredible. And there was bodies in the water and everything. If you saw Private Ryan, it was very similar to that, but it was compressed a lot more. Anyway, all of a sudden, I feel this like that underneath me, and an 88 had penetrated our steering engine room down. And what it had done was it had blown to bits our flagman and a kid that had his head wounded the day before, who couldn't be down below. He was sitting next to him because he had no duties he could perform, and he got blown to bits. And just before that, there was a guy who come running on board, coming up the ramp, and our bosun mate, I said, "Get back." He thought it was a soldier deserting, and he said, No, I'm a cameraman." He said, "I'm a cameraman." He said, "I got to get off the beach," and everything else. It was Robert Capa, who had been in the first wave, had strings of cameras around him. He no sooner got on our ship, and we got hit, and he took these pictures. Well, by the time we got hit, I'd run down the ladder. I'd gone down to the deck where the guys are hit, and I had been putting a big dressing. I'll show you a picture of it a little later. I'd been putting a dressing on this one kid. His name was Jack D'Annunzio, Italian kid, 6 foot something, good looking. Women used to be crazy about him every time we'd go on Liberty. He had the whole bottom of him blown off, and the other kid that had his head split open, it's just there was nothing left of him. He was just gone. And Kappa took the pictures. Just at that point, he was up with the skipper, and he had taken these 2 pictures, along with all the other stuff he had of that was famous in Life magazine with the other. And this picture is in Life magazine too, by the one I'm in. But we didn't know who Robert Kappa was. I mean, nobody even knew that the pictures would be anywhere. Anyway, as the skipper said, "Haboush, go back to the emergency steering engine room in the stern of the ship," he says, and he said, well, we're going to give you, because the engine room wasn't functioning anymore. The sequence of events is mixed up in my head because things were happening so fast. I would say maybe the whole thing took place in 15, 20 minutes max, if it was that. So I was going down the ladder, and I worked in. As I was going down the steps, there was this guy, Fletcher Burton, I was talking to him for, lay like this spread eagle at the bottom of the steps. He had gotten a piece of shrapnel. I had figured this out after the fact. A piece of the shrapnel that blew Bunzig and D'Annunzio. Anyway, it had penetrated his forehead. So it's like a little dot on the top of his head. And I ran down and I grabbed him. I picked up his head, and the whole back of his head was gone. And so then I went back to the stern anchor, and we got off the beach, fortunately, and we headed to the hospital ship and the place that Kappa had been, so we could take him off the ship. And we wanted to get rid of our dead because there were 10 injured out of a crew of 30. There were about 10 injured, and I know it was 3 or 4 that were killed. I used to think it was 4. I think it was only 3 now. Anyway, by that time we had to scrape these guys up and put them in a bag. And when the picture was taken that Kappa took of Jack, he died right while I had the plaster on him. His eyes rolled back, and he died. I was praying for him to die. There was no reason for him to live, but no bottom half to him. But we were in the picture. You'll see that we were trying to give him. I'm getting emotional. Anyway, we get off the beach, and and the only reason I could clean this one guy up was because I thought of my dad's grocery store, and I thought about our meat market, because there was pieces of bone and everything there, and parts of their flak jackets and everything, scraping them up and everything. And I'd taken and put a blanket in the bottom of one of those wire things, and we filled and put Jack D'Annunzio in it, and we unloaded him onto the hospital ship. And along with there was a third guy that was killed, was Jack. I think there was 4 guys. I'm not sure, but I can't remember right now. Anyway, we go out to the hospital ship. We take Capo off the ship and everything else, and we've lost our left ramp. Got blown off by one of the mines on one of those iron things. So we only had one ramp on the right side. And we're going back out into the harbor. We didn't have anybody on board, and this little pilot ship comes out, and the loudspeaker says, "Can you take on? We've got 60. I don't know what they were. Another division of Army guys. So can you take them in to shore?" And the skipper said, "We only have one ramp, but we can surely unload 60. That would be easy." So they put these guys on, and all of a sudden, I have my little Jewish buddy. We used to call him Murphy. And he and I were buddies. We'd go on Liberty together and everything. And he and I, they put us in the #1 gun. That's right on the front of the ship. And the skipper's sitting up there with the wind, and we're headed in again to the beach. I wasn't scared the first time. I was terrified this time. And so we looked up at the skipper. We said, "Oh, you glory hound, you're going to get us killed," and all that. Turn back and everything. And we're getting closer and closer. And you didn't know a war was going on. 200 yards out, you didn't know a war was going on. It was just when you got into machine gun range and all that. And this was, they didn't secure that beach until about 2-3 hours after this time. They just couldn't make it up there. They finally broke through, and they went up and took out the machine gun nests and everything. These destroyers would go along there, and they were trying to find where they were, and they were using smokeless powder, so they couldn't see where the guns were coming from. And every once in a while, they'd hit one and explode it, and you would be going, yay. But it was just chaos. It was just chaos. There was absolutely, and that was the only beach where they met that kind of resistance. And on Utah Beach, they practically walked in. Anyway, we get about 50 yards off the beach, and another little smaller craft, an LSM, comes alongside of us. And they said, "You're not to go in. You only have one ramp." They took them off. We turned around, went back out. Murphy and I went, "Oh my God, this saved our life," And then, of course, we just laid out there. We did a lot of back and forth. We took stuff in on the beach, and we had this huge storm 3 days later that wrecked all the stuff. They had formed they had sunk these ships and these dry dock things to try to break the waves so we could go in easier. And they started unloading equipment and everything else. So about a week later, we were starting, all we became was a ferry. We'd bring new troops and go in there, and it was relatively safe. So, there was no more shooting on the beach. They had gone inland. They progressed. Once they got up there, they went in pretty fast. And at night we'd see skirmishes. We'd see like explosions and things. We'd see planes maybe getting shot down or something. So kind of like a picture show. And then if something happened, everybody in the harbor would open up. All these tracer bullets and everything, and that's when it was really fearful. I'd lay down. I wasn't religious, but I'd say, 10 Marys, our fathers and everything. I'd say, "Okay, let me get through this thing. I promise I'll be a better guy when I get home." But it's still in all, the war wasn't real to me, and till we started taking the wounded back they would start bringing wounded, so we take our wounded, and we were taking the German wounded back. And I had never seen the Germans. I thought all the Germans were Sieg Heil, Max Schnell, Achtung, and I'd seen all scars, crew cuts and everything. And here come Hitler's Ulcer Brigade, these old guys with glasses, and these young kids. And there's this one little young kid who had been shot in the chest. He was really bad off. I don't know if he made it or not. But I'm looking at him, and I say, "Jesus, who talked him into fighting us? What are we doing killing each other?" And all of a sudden, the whole stupidity of war, all that propaganda I had seen, all those movies and everything, just, what's going on here? I hadn't formed it yet, and I didn't have any political opinions about it. We still were going to win the war, and but as far as political aspects, why we were in it, what was happening, we knew nothing about the concentration camps. Nobody even knew that there was a concentration camp, not on our ship. So anyway, it just changed me. It's just like overnight I was saying, "God, what's happening here?" Anyway, to make a long story short, it really turned me against just the savagery of war. I mean, I no longer was glory hound, no longer did I necessarily care. And of course, my brother, who was killed 4.5 months later, he was on a landing craft, an LST, and they were going into Leyte, and a kamikaze plane hit it. And of course today, I'll mention this, that I'm married to a Japanese woman, and you can't blame her for what went on in Japan. So, it was one of those things where it was divide and conquer, and the good guys, bad guys, kind of the same thing that's going on now. And this is the kind of reason I wanted to record it, and I was happy you asked me, Bob. But we come back, we go into dry dock in Norfolk. I fall madly in love with a girl there. She sent me a Dear John letter a few months later, telling me that she'd met another sailor, and broke my heart. And we went around through the Panama Canal, and we came up to San Diego, and then we were given orders that we were to go to Guam, and then we were going to go attack Tokyo. So when we got to Guam,
Very loud truck.
Yeah, you could close that door. Yeah. Oh, can you get up, Mom?
They'll start over with, then we were going to go attack.
Yeah, then all of a sudden we were given orders to go to Guam and join the attack force to, invade Tokyo. And
Then we went to.
yeah. Okay, anyway, we got orders to go to Guam, and then the big flotillas were gathering there, and they were going to attack Tokyo. So when we got halfway to Hawaii, and we heard that the VE Day, Europe had surrendered. So now the only people left were the Japanese, and so we were headed to Tokyo. We get to Guam, and there were the battleships and the flotilla. It made Normandy look small, and Normandy was huge, with all the ships and everything. They had everything in there. And by now, I'm feeling very uncomfortable about making that invasion. I think Jesus, I could easily get killed in this. This is a real thing. It's not something you're going to come out and be John Wayne, or and then of course what happened is that they dropped the atom bomb, and they dropped Hiroshima, and then they went and dropped Nagasaki, and the Japanese surrendered. And all of a sudden, we're just sitting there out there waiting to get discharged, everybody. And we went to Rennet and Kwajalein, and we were in a Weetalk where they exploded the bomb afterwards, testing. And I sat there for about 2 months, something like that, waiting to get a ship. And all the people who were married and had families, they got more points. So all the guys that had just been there for a couple of weeks, and here I'd been in Europe, and I'd been in this place, and I had to sit there and wait to come home. I get a letter from my dad. He says, we just moved. We moved to Hunga, and I thought we moved to Tijuana. I told everybody, I'm living in Mexico now, and everybody, you're lucky and all that. So anyway, that's basically the whole story. I came back, and everybody, it was McCarthy era, there was all this J.B. Kinney and everything. And I thought, America, we won the war, and everything is going to be fine, and now we're starting to hear about the concentration camps and Hitler and all that sort of thing. And all of a sudden we had the McCarthy era, and here was this terrible guy, Joe McCarthy, I don't want to go on beyond that, but it was incredible how that all unfolded, and I met my friend Ivan Durrell, who was pretty much of a socialist. And he turned me to the left. I got being going to the right, turning to the left. And I actually when I was going to Art Center, I roomed with this woman who was one of the seven. She was a writer, and she had this little house across from Warner Brothers, and she was one of the women who were being investigated as being communist. And she'd always have these big meetings in there with the garment union and all that, talking about America, the bastard of freedom, instead of the bastion of freedom. I heard one of the most incredible speeches there one night. I went, oh my God, I'm moving out of here. I'm not staying with this commie woman, But it was that whole thing of, anyway, it's just amazing how things change, And we were in the harbor after the invasion, and this LCVP comes up, had this beautiful wave on there, and we were all going, whoa, wee, and everybody said, shut up, it was, what's his name, I see it's a senior moment. It was one guy's sister, the guy I was in the telling me about him having 6 sisters.
Mhm.
And she said, "Oh, come on, guys, it's okay." She was coming on board to see what had happened to her brother. And then we heard about my brother and, being killed in Leyte and everything, and my parents were wiped out. So it was a weird transition in realizing how stupid war is. War is man's lowest common denominator. I don't know how you can think that you're going to conquer something by more violence. I just don't understand it. It's really incredible. But the end. I can show you those pictures now.
Yeah, and we got an airplane, so the timing is right.
Yeah, good. To see Private Ryan, they saved a seat for me. They bought me dinner. This guy Bill had all this World War II Army gear and everything. He bought helmets down. I took pictures with Brad Bird. He's the director of Iron Giant. They had me there, and so I was like the visiting guy there. How was it? Was it like that? And I said, no, not really, but it was really brutal, like it was, but it was all concentrated. It was made a lot smaller, much smaller, where it was spread out a lot more.
So you were on a ship. You left the harbor.
85. We sailed it from southern France. We came through the Atlantic and down through the Hebrides, and we hit an 80-mile tornado off the Hebrides, and then we landed in Norfolk, West Virginia, and that's when they did minor repairs on us. And then we came down around through the Panama Canal, and we came up to San Diego, where National City, which is had all the dry docks there, and then they put the ship on dry dock and they repaired it for all the damage that we had taken, and they made it like new. And then they put us back in the water, and then we.
But you started from England and you went across?
No, I went to England in a Liberty ship.
Then you transferred
but
to this?
yeah, when I picked up this little ship, then I was on it.
That was it.
We went from southern France to Norfolk, down through the Panama Canal to Guam. I mean, that's a lot of little tiny ships, 7 miles cruising, 7 knots cruising speed, and all expendable. And we'd run out of food, we'd run out of water. Everything would start having bugs in the bread, So it was really down and dirty, But it was fun. So we're going to get those pictures.
We need to.
You can see this in here, Tom.
Yeah.
This is where that other guy was blown up. It's just bits and pieces of the guy. And this is Jack right here. See him? You can see this is Jack D'Annunzio. And he didn't have any bottom. And what I've got is this huge, big thing, like a big, what is it when you absorb the blood? It was like a thing you put over to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
It was a big pad. It had cotton in about that thick, and I had put it on the bottom of them to try to stop some of the bleeding.
Why don't you just start? This is the photograph from Life magazine.
Yeah, this is a photograph from Life magazine that Robert Capa had Eisenhower on the cover. And this was, to tell you the truth, Capa had taken a lot of pictures, and they rushed him back to New York, and there was this young kid there who was in training, and he put him into the vat to develop the film, and he turned on the dryer to dry it, and he left it on too long, and it melted all the pictures except, I think it was like 13, 14 that stayed. And this was one of them that stayed, and that's why they had it in there. But the rest of them were the ones they had in Life magazine with these guys hiding behind these big iron, very famous Capa pictures.
So,
but
where are you?
Okay, I'm right here, this little fella here, and this is Jack D'Annunzio, and he had his lower bottom blown off by this 88 that had come through the ship, gone through and hit him and a guy named Bunzig, and nothing was left of Bunzig. You can see pieces of Bunzig back in here. This was our, what do you call it, the medic.
Oh, pieces in this picture?
Yeah, right here. He was the medic, and we couldn't get the bottle.
Oh, the P was blown, but you don't see pieces of him in the shot.
No, but you see him right here on this post right here. You can see he had a pockmarked jacket, these big jackets that were full of cotton on. And there's the pieces of it there, and there's all through here. It's laying here. You can't see it here, but anyway, we couldn't get the. He was trying to give him a blood transfusion, and the blood wasn't working. They were trying to put the needle. They hadn't put in the needle. The other picture that he took, the same one with another camera, that was a wider lens, has me leaning in more. I actually was praying for him to die. He was this real handsome 6-foot-something Italian kid that women were just crazy about, and his whole bottom was gone. Anyway, from the waist down almost. He didn't have genitals or anything. They were gone. But he was still alive here, and he just drained the blood drained out of him, and he died right while we were giving him the transfusion. But anyway. This, you can see the ship here. You can see this was right here. This thing right here had all the flags in it, and Jack was. This, see this little container here? He's got all this stuff sitting on it. This is where all the flags were kept. They'd put them out and run them up the post and give directions of which way the ships were going to go. So you can see down here. Anyway, the other fellow that was killed, Fletcher Burton. There were 2 guys killed here, and Fletcher Burton. That's why I'm not sure whether there was 4. I always thought there were 4, but maybe it was just 3 that were killed on our ship, and there were about 10 injured. But the guys that were in the steering room were all injured, and where the shell entered, and it exploded. Anyway, right down here was a ladder that went straight down a stairwell, and where Fletcher Burton was found was at the bottom of that stairwell, and he had a piece of shrapnel. And I think now that the same explosion that killed these 2 guys here, I think it got Fletcher coming up the steps too, the fellow who I had been talking about earlier on, that we were talking about if we died, what about our family, the one that had the 6 sisters. Anyway, this guy here was a really brave guy. He's a guy that when we were coming, oh, this guy here, this is him right here. This guy right here, see him? He actually, when we were getting into the shore, once we hit the beach, he actually went down, the first guy down the ramp, and he grabbed the front anchor, and he carried it and buried it about 40 feet in front of the ship, so that we had both front anchor and back anchor that held us there. And then the soldiers came down both ramps. These are the ramps they'd come down, but you can't quite see them here. The ramp was up this way in the front, but this is where you went onto them and got on them and then went out. But pretty famous picture. Anyway. You can see Jack. Can you go in on this area? Yeah. See his arm here? Yeah. See, and his face is right in here. You can see his face here, right in here. That's really sad, one of the sad moments. But anyway.
Let me get some shots. I'll just get some individuals. Casualties.
Yeah.
Sick, bring back wounded and dead.
Yeah. This guy, Tommy, he was a crazy guy. He was... he'd always get himself in trouble.
Which one is Tommy?
Tommy right here. He was always a guy that did strange things, got put on report. Everything is. We had all sorts of characters on the ship. But our bosun mate, this guy here, who was actually knew nothing about medics, he didn't even know how to get this thing working. This all came on so quickly. We didn't expect anybody to be doing this sort of thing. They had given me this huge pad that was to stop the bleeding, and I was holding it on the bottom part of him here. It was just so sad. It was a really sad moment. It didn't take him long to get out of it, but they were trying to save him here. Okay.
Get the caption down there.
Oh yeah, this is, you can see it. It's here, it says here, ships brings back the wounded and dead. We were doing that, but this was not while we were bringing them back. And this is Robert Capa here. Actually, he wrote a totally unreal thing of what had happened. He said that when he got on board, he said he yelled at this guy, I'm a photographer, I've got all these great pictures of the invasion. And so then we let him come aboard. We didn't take him off the ship. So anyway, when he writes about this in Life magazine, he said that the skipper had his on-duty officer had been blown up, and the skipper had him held in his arms, and he was crying, which wasn't true. Skipper was up on the top of the ship. Nothing happened near him. And he says that the ship sank as we took him out to the when we got rid of the wounded. As we took the wounded off, the ship sank. It's right here. It was a total lie. And Capa didn't have to lie. I mean, this guy was so brave. He went in on the first wave, and then he was there. He almost was killed. But it's amazing how these misrepresentations. There was also an article in Ambrose's book, D-Day, and this guy that he interviewed was a machinist mate. He wasn't even on deck, and he said that the night before that the skipper had given us all whiskey and everybody was half drunk when we went in. I mean, how stupid could anything be? Nobody would do that going into an invasion of that sort of. I mean, it was like, really important that we were got our full attention that day. But it's amazing how the lies spread. Anyway, this is a crew.
Okay,
Can you get the whole thing in there from here to
the
here?
whole thing side.
Okay.
Let it steady out.
These are the players on our ship. This is the crew, the full crew. And
And where are you?
I'm right here. And my friend Murphy, George Weisberg, is right here. I never looked him up. I should have looked him up after the war. He's from New York.
Okay, point yourself out again.
Right here.
That's you.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other guy?
George Murphy is right here. The fellow that was killed, the guy that was dying on that ship, is this fellow here. It's Jack D'Annunzio. The other fellow, Bunzig, I think it's this guy right here. Bunzig. And I thought the other guy was this guy here, and it could very well be. It's vague to me right now how many people died out of the crew, because it's just like one of those things that was like, I really didn't, while the whole thing was going on, I was kind of like in a trance. It was like unreal. I was sort of like in a film or something. Anyway, this was our skipper right here, right here, a little redhead. He was only about 5'6", short little guy, and he was a captain, and he ran our whole flotilla. He was in charge of 8 ships going in. Very good sailor, though. This guy was sort of a numbnuts. We didn't think too much of him. He was sort of out of it. This guy, Basham, was a brand new guy. He'd only been on the ship 1 month before the invasion, and he got put on report the first day because he was washing his socks in the sink where we used to prepare the food. And the old man caught him and put him on report. But everybody liked him. He was a pretty nice guy. He was actually one of us, and he used to kid with us a lot. And this guy here was so weird. He was the second in command, but he was a nice guy. But he just didn't make much noise. This is our chief petty officer here, and he was called. He just always go, Judas Priest, Judas Priest. So I painted the naked girl on our ship. I was the artist on board. And I painted a mermaid with her arms stretched out, and then I had the soldiers marching down her arms onto the beach, and I put Judas Priest up there. It was an LCI 94. And interesting, this guy right here was, no, wait a minute, that's not him. Oh, this guy right here, this guy was an idiot. His name was McQuaig. He actually launched himself into the number 2 gun. And you couldn't shoot. You'd shoot our guys. There was nothing to shoot at. And he was talking like how he stood on the gun all through the invasion. I could tell you, Norris, fellow that was reading.
Go ahead. Start.
This gentleman right here is Fletcher Burton, another very good-looking man. He was probably about 6'3", built like a football player. And he's the guy that I was talking to who was reading War and Peace. By the way, I'll just tell you quickly, right after the war, the first book I went out and bought, I had never read a book all the way through it. I started reading War and Peace. And the first 200 pages, I couldn't figure out who the Rotsovs were, anybody. They had all these Russian names and everything. And all of a sudden, I locked into it, and I knew who Dmitri and I figured out all the characters, and I finished reading it. And that was my first book that I read full through. And I always thought of Jack here. But what a lovely man he was. And he was a guy that was laying at the bottom of the steps with a little tiny hole in his head, and the back of his head gone. So it was this gentleman here, and for sure this gentleman here that were killed that day. Basham was injured because he was in the engine room. He was injured. I don't know who all was injured here, because the ship, by the way, after we came back and we went into dry dock, they changed the whole crew around. They brought new guys on, took old guys off. It was a whole new crew. And actually, I was taken to another ship. I went off the 94 to the 80-something. I went to a 324. I went to a different ship. So we were all moved around in the thing. So we didn't stay on the same ship. The skipper was released. He went off duty. He went to doing something else. But that's pretty much the whole Oh, I have to tell you about this fellow here. This is Chris. He was our steward's mate, and he was really the servant of the officers. Boy, people don't understand how absolutely prejudiced the service was. black guys were, all they did is they used them for the docks. That's why the Enola Gay and all the people who were black that did anything was pretty amazing,
Oh,
because
the
they were.
black, I'm sorry. I was on
Yeah,
the
this
guy.
fellow, this guy right here, Chris.
Uh-huh.
He was about 6'4", and he wanted to be a machinist mate. He joined up to be a machinist mate. Instead, they made him a stewardess mate. He had to fix their beds, you know, do all of the work for them, serve their meals and everything. Outrageous. When you think about it, we didn't think anything about it. We thought it was, you know, that's the way it was supposed to be. And we all thought that he would be scared. He would be like Step and Fetch It, you know, like feet, you know, don't fail me now. He was one of the bravest guys on our ship. I mean, you know, it's just like, it was just the way they treated minorities during the war, the prejudice in the services was outrageous. It was really unbelievable. Oh, okay. This little picture here, I don't know if you can focus on that. Can you get the?
Yeah.
I haven't
Okay,
tried
so let me frame this guy up.
Alright.
get
So
a
where was
nice-
this taken?
If you can get, this is in Torquay, England.
Okay.
And you know, the first thing we all did when
Does
we,
this look awful, the apple box?
No, it looks like it's a nice
the
big
first
small-
thing we all did was go out and buy tailor-made blues. We had to pay for them. They were private. And they were, this thing was so tight on me, it was for standing up and dancing. It was not for sitting down. And it had zippers on the side because I couldn't get in it unless I zipped it down.
Yeah. Yeah,
But it was my pride and joy. I don't know how much I paid for it, but I was real proud of it.
that's real
We used to go, there was a Torquay ballroom on a hill in Torquay, England. You know, this is the southern coast of England. This is where all the great places were. This is the vacation time, Brighton, you know, all those places. So I was really, I had gone one evening and I had to catch a train back to the ship. We were 15, 20 minutes away, and we were in Weymouth and we docked at in the Dart River at the mystery writer, the great mystery writer, the English Agatha Christie's home, and she had donated the home to the Coast Guard, and they were using it. They were using her kitchen. She had these huge stoves, and there was these great ovens, and they were baking this beautiful dark bread. It was so delicious, and so it was given to the Coast Guard, and then up by Dart College, just at the head of the Dart River, was Dartmouth, and that's where the Navy had that. So every once in a while we'd go eat with the Navy guys, and sometimes the Navy guys would come on our ship. But they'd bake this great bread. It was heavy black bread with real heavy crust. We'd put it in a toaster and toast it, and we were out there in the morning freezing, chipping paint and everything. It was just delicious to have that bread with the jam. It was wonderful. And on the Dart River, there was a little town called Didisham, right across from Agatha Christie's home. We used to sail up there, and you'd go up there, you'd think you were in a Arthur Rackham, the little thatched houses with roofs and everything. They had these cherry orchards. And that was right after the invasion. It was turning to spring, because I think it was June when the invasion was, June 7th. It was June 7th, wasn't it? I forget the date.
June 6th.
6th, yeah. So actually they were just starting, the trees were in bloom and everything. It was just beautiful. It was almost like a fairyland up there.
Okay, I've got to get